I want to pick up a few comments which have been made. Tony Dick says, a question. I understand the general importance of education. However, I cannot quite understand how learning about, say, quantum electrodynamics will make me more tolerant of immigrant grooming gangs who assault local girls. What sort of education will help to fix the problems, or are we just talking brainwashing here? And Dougalbird says, Tim likes to talk about education, but I'm not convinced he actually understands much about it. First of all, any sort of education is good because it gets the mind practicing thinking about abstract thought and thinking about other people and thinking beyond our own little circle of selfish obsession. Secondly, the education that I particularly propose and that I think needs to be seriously revised is the teaching of religious studies and PSHE, this ridiculous acronym which covers an attempt to encourage children to reflect on life beyond school. And both are appallingly taught. How do I know? Because I've been involved in classes where I've been teaching these things, and I've looked at textbooks, I've listened to other people teaching, and I think we've got it badly wrong. The courses have moved towards a sort of comparative religion, which is based on festivities and on rites of passage. It's a very limited understanding of other people's beliefs. Why do I think religious education is useful? Partly because it's my subject, but partly because it's one way into the culture of other people, of people beyond our own orbit. But it's very badly taught. The textbooks are second-rate. The information is poor. It would be much better if schools imported good, well-sourced, invigorating information on the internet, or bought in lessons which could be played on a monitor, than tried to field their own second-rate knowledge through the filter of their own religious background. What we need is a more comprehensive understanding of other cultures and other beliefs. And I think we need particularly a better understanding of Islam in this country, partly because of the negative efforts of people like Tommy Robinson to re-edit the Quran. And yes, it's true that Christianity and Judaism long ago abandoned, as Douglas Murray would say, the verses in the scriptures which are most hateful. And the scriptures that we use in Christianity and Judaism are already interpreted. They pass through a series of interpretations depending on the tradition that we follow. There are people who claim that they can read the Bible and that this speaks directly to them. Nobody directly reads the Bible. They read it within the context of a religious or indeed an atheistic viewpoint. They bring ideas to that reading. And the same thing is true of Islam. Islam has very specific interpretive texts, mostly the hadiths and the various lives of the Prophet. And there are other religious traditions which are very poorly understood, very poorly taught in our schools. That is one area. But actually, I dispute Tony Dick's point about electrodynamics. The more I understand about electrodynamics, the more I understand about detail, and the more I think detail is important. The detail about electrodynamics is as important as the ontological argument from the 11th century put forward by Anselm. And whether these things are important to my ultimate existence doesn't really matter. They stretch the brain and they make me think about things beyond the immediate context of where my next meal is coming from. And that is something that we must be teaching children to do, because so much information is available on the internet. We have to find a way to engage children and young students particularly with real thought. So I'm not talking about brainwashing. I'm talking about encouraging and teaching children and young adults about the traditions that underpin our society. Because, the reality is the society that we live in today is dependent particularly on the three great Abrahamic religions, on Christianity, on Judaism, and on Islam, because without Islam we would not have had the Renaissance, we would not have had so many of the developments in mathematics on which we now rely. The current Islamophobic drive is irrational and ill-informed. And there are people on here who I know will start talking about having read the Quran. They've probably read it in English. They've probably read a very specific and very poor translation. They may even have read Tommy Robinson's rot. To read the Quran is to read it in Arabic. In the same way, to read the Bible is to read it in Greek and Hebrew. Or to read it with a guide who really knows what they're talking about, who really understands what is going on here. Now, it is possible to get those guides, and it is possible that they can interpret this stuff for school children, but we don't, it's very nice, very pretty to talk about rites of passage. It's very pretty to have architectural designs of churches and mosques and synagogues. But it's limited information. And if we're going to start talking about the architecture of religion, then we should be discussing the great works of, let's say, Pugin in Christianity, particularly given the fact that Pugin was so central in designing the House of Parliament. Or Sinan, the architect, who transformed the architecture of orthodoxy, the Byzantine architecture of Hagia Sophia, into the prototype mosques that were first dotted around what is now modern Turkey, and are still the prototype in so many countries of what one thinks a mosque should be. And I don't hear the name of Sinan the architect in school syllabuses. I don't see that. Why not? Why are we not energizing children's interest by looking at all the different aspects, all the different cultural dynamics that religion has brought with it into the modern world? And that's just looking at the three Abrahamic religions. Then you've also got so many Eastern religions which also admit great interest, and atheism, which is a belief in and of itself and deserves to be looked at. We've got into a habit in the schools of reducing religion to rites of passage, and then later on in A-levels, ethics. It's dull, and it's not very useful. And at the same time, we aren't introducing children to the central texts, or indeed to a knowledge of the differing languages that underpin the various cultures that inhabit our towns and cities. We need greater integration. We need Not only, I think, better religious education, we need better English education. And people who are coming into the country should have an opportunity to engage in lessons to improve their English, if necessary, paying for these lessons through taxation later on when they have got jobs and are contributing to our economy in exactly the same way as students pay off their student loan. This is something that was pioneered by Israel, and it's something that we should be doing. The days when people are pottering around the country and cannot speak English should be gone. If people are going to come to Britain, then they should speak English, and we should be helping them to do so. And it should be part of the citizenship qualification. The citizenship qualification, that ridiculous book, which talks about which tries to do social engineering at the same time as testing whether or not somebody belongs in this country, with ridiculous questions about what is a gap year. This should be gone. Instead, people should be taking courses in English and in history. They can be basic. They don't need to be advanced. It doesn't need to be university level. But it needs to be informed. In the same way as you take courses for driving and for speed awareness. You take courses rather than silly tests. Completing the course should be enough. And we should trust the people running those courses to monitor and mark the people who are attending them. This idea that everybody needs to do a test to qualify, this should be one of the first tests to go. Instead, we should trust the teachers. And we should do more of that trusting of the teachers all the way down the school system. Trusting teachers to mark and administer the GCSE exams, for example, and the 11 plus exams, or whatever whatever exams are being done earlier on in children's school careers. A-levels may be, there's a case for an external marking system, but I think we have gone too far in this idea that schooling and education is a factory, that where you go in at one end in primary school and you come out at the other with a degree. A degree isn't the aim. The aim is a rounded individual who can participate fully in our society. Not everybody needs a degree, and that shouldn't be the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal should be an individual who can function well in our society. And that requires a much more enlightened education, a much broader education, and an education which isn't so dependent on passing exams. Certainly not external exams. We need a change in education if we are going to address the problems in our society. And those problems are enormous. And those problems have been perpetuated by a series of extremely maladroit Home Secretaries